One.
Good day and welcome. As I did last Friday, I wish to update the public on the plans to transition our public schools from remote learning to in-person instruction. Since the previous update, there have been 7 preschools, 12 primary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 alternative school that have reached over 80% parent consent. These schools have either completed or are being scheduled for their pre-return testing. I want to take this time to congratulate these schools, especially Southampton Preschool, that returned to in-person classes yesterday, and St. Paul's Preschool and Lagoon Park Preschool, which returned to in-person classes today. While Gilbert Institute was scheduled to return today, that return will be delayed until Monday to allow for some additional cleaning to happen within the school. Port Royal and West Pembroke Primary are cleared to return to in-person learning on Monday as well. Other schools that have gone over 80% parent consent and have completed pre-return testing are Victor Scott Preschool, East End Primary, Purvis Primary, Prospect Primary, and Success Academy at Roberts Avenue. The parents and staff of the other schools mentioned are currently on standby to receive notification about whether or not their school will reopen next week as we continue to review the pre-return testing data. I want to pause for a minute and thank the parents and guardians of all the students who have given their consent for the Saliva screening program to support their school in meeting the target for reopening. We hope to see more parents give consent and more schools reopening in the upcoming weeks. It is critical that we reopen our schools for in-person learning and keep them open. The screening program is critical to doing this, and I encourage any parent or guardian who have not consented to reconsider and do so. I'm also pleased to report that we have 10 more schools who have reached consent for 80% or more of their students to participate in the Saliva screening program. These schools are Delwood Middle School, Elliott Primary, Heron Bay Primary, Lyceum Preschool, Northlands Primary, St. David's Primary, St. George's Prep, St. George's Preschool, Victor Scott Primary, and Warwick Preschool. This now takes us to a total of 21 out of 36 schools who have met or exceeded the 80% target for consent for the COVID screening program. These schools will be scheduled for PCR pre-return testing, and parents can expect to receive notification from the Department of Education with the location, dates, and time to meet. I can also report that we have 77% of the students in our public schools with consent for the Saliva screening program. We have received questions about the need to hold pre-return testing and have been challenged with what is the authority to require a negative test before being allowed to return to school. Parents and guardians, I reiterate that we all need to do what's best for the safety of our entire school population. It should be a given that knowing your COVID status before returning to school is something all of us will want to know. Our stance is firm and is supported by the Education Act and the Occupational Safety and Health Act. A negative test is required to return to school, and failure to produce such will result in your child receiving take-home packets until a negative PCR test is received. I'm also pleased to report that the Ministry and Department of Education met with the Ministry and Department of Health this morning. The current COVID guidelines for schools were discussed as we look to make modifications to keep our schools safe and open for learning. Additionally, we discussed the quarantine policy around positive detection within a school and the use of lateral flow testing to supplement the current Saliva COVID screening program. We all agree that positive cases will be found as we grapple with the pandemic. But a more nuanced approach to quarantining for positive students needs to be developed. It is the desire not to have to quarantine an entire class if a positive case is detected in that class. More updates will be forthcoming on the enhanced policies in the near future. I would also like to announce that the Department of Education will hold online meetings in the coming weeks to listen to parents' concerns about the COVID screening program and provide them with more information about the program and respond to their questions. I would also like to thank all teachers and support staff who have worked tirelessly to ensure that this transition back to the classroom is smooth. And lastly, I would like to thank all of the health workers who have supported the Ministry of Education and Department of Education to complete the testing. In closing, I remind you that vaccination remains the best protection against COVID-19, and I encourage those who have concerns to talk to their healthcare provider. And until you do that, please keep safe by mask wearing, physical distancing, hand sanitizing, and stay at home if you are sick. As I've said countless times, we all have a role to ensuring that our students are supported and prepared to be the shining stars of the future. Bermuda, let's all band together and get our children back to where they belong, inside of our schools. And at this time, I would like to open the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Minister. We'd like to invite Owen Johnson Barnes from the Royal Gazette to ask a few questions.
Shining stars of the future. Bermuda, let's all band.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. First question, Owen Johnson Barnes with the Royal Gazette. What requirements are in place for teachers and staff at these schools to be ready for reopening? Obviously, the saliva testing is necessary for 80% of students, but what about the rest of the people who are at the schools?
We've already, thank you for that question, Owen. We've already stated that the requirements for the students are the same requirements for the teachers and staff at the school. So the staff have to get up to 80% saliva testing, screening, and a pre-return negative test is required.
Now, have you had any resistance from the teachers or the unions to that policy?
As a matter of fact, the last time I did speak with the union, where we had our meeting with the BUT and the BPSU and the BIU in our EEMC meeting, there was actually support for the fact that we wanted to test before we moved back in. And so I'm hoping that remains as it is. As I said in my statement, it's actually common sense to know what your status is before you go back into the school. And then also use of the screening program to ensure that we capture any persons that do just happen to pick up this virus. We can catch them early and put them and do the things that are necessary to isolate them, but keep the school open. So it's a win-win. For me, it's a win-win situation across the board for us to do it this way. And I'm hoping that everyone does agree with that as we move in. What we've seen, Owen, is for the testing, we've seen 100% of pre-return testing. We've seen in almost all cases 100% of students and 100% of staff showing up for their testing. So that's a positive stance moving forward.
Now, obviously we have some good news today with several schools getting ready to open. Can you say what happens if a school never reaches 80%? Is there a backup plan in place?
We will have discussions around that. What we want to do is administer to the schools that have reached the 80%, and then once we get past those schools being open, and I want to stress that it is intentional for us to have staggered openings. We do not want to open everything at the same time and then make the transition that much more difficult for our staff, for our students, and like so. Even though I showed a list of 10 schools that have reached 80%, all of them will not be going in on the same day. They will be scheduled for testing and there will be staggered starts. Once we get past these schools that have reached the 80%, we'll start looking at the other schools, because there could be a school that's in the high 70s. And as I talked about in the statement, we'll be reaching out to parents to actually talk to them and say, what is the hesitation? What can we do to get you to come on board? Barring that, we will then look at how can we work with what we do have and work with the ones that do not wish to have the test of pre-return testing or the screening program, and how we can work with them as well. But the intention is to, once we do get the schools open, to keep them open. And that is always the intention.
Now, you mentioned obviously the successful schools. However, we have heard that some schools obviously have a much lower take-up. We've heard rumors of at least one school having as low as 40%. Can you say if that's the case? What is sort of the low end of this right
Actually, thank you for that question. The updated data, because it gets crunched on a weekly basis and an update is given to me. So unfortunately, the only thing I can report would be the data that I got on Monday, and I will be getting a new list on Monday. Actually, Owen, it's surprising when I look at a school like St. David's Primary is on the list. Last week, St. David's Primary was one of the lowest, but now they've gone over 80%. And so it's working. Persons are either becoming more informed and signing up. And so, and we also said that overall is at 77%. That is for the entire population. So that does mean that just looking at that, there has to be the majority of the schools, if not all of them, have to be pretty high at the moment for us to get up to a total of 77%. And so we will just keep working on it. And talking and getting the word out there that is a non-invasive test. It's a screening test we will use. I think the announcement that we're looking at how the quarantine policy can be changed, because some people are scared of that, of, okay, if there's a positive test, then the whole class is out, and then that has an impact on, the parents at home and such. And we recognize that as we've gotten this far with COVID and we start to know a little bit more about how things operate, and when you factor in more people are vaccinated and such. So a different approach has to be taken, and we're looking to take a different approach to that. And so I'm hoping having conversations like this will encourage more people to sign up, knowing that, we're going to be looking at things differently if a positive is found. And it will not necessarily mean that an entire class has to go out if one of the children in the class is found positive.
Now, can you explain why, in a case where, for example, if a school had 75% acceptance, can you say why those 75% would not be allowed to go to school? I mean, it seems like the people who are right now abiding by government suggestions and instructions might be feeling a little bit like they're not being rewarded for their efforts.
Well, and as I stated just now, we will deal with the schools that have made it to the 80% or above. Once we're finished with them, we'll go back and start looking at what other ways we can deal with schools that haven't reached it and have been struggling to reach it, and how we can address that. Simply put, the way it's set up is the way we cannot do remote learning and in-school learning in parallel with each other. It's either one or the other. And so if you can imagine what it would be like if 50% of the students are in and 50% are not in, and the tremendous amount of unfair and undue stress that will put on our staff and our teachers, having to figure out how to now teach the 50% that are coming to school and preparing packets for 50% that are staying at home. And so we wanted to make it at a level where, if we get to that level, it makes sense to have the school open, and the Saliva screening program is effective within the program. Even if you have a few students that have opted, whose parents have opted out, it's still an effective program. If it remains at those levels, we will have to come back and have a different approach and look at how we could possibly have a school that only has 75% of the persons have consented, and what we're going to do with that other 25%. So it is something that is open for us to go back and take a look at. But right now, as we have 21 out of our 36 schools that are at the 80% or above, we will be concentrating on those 21 schools and getting them up and running, and then come back and look at the others.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Owen.
And thank you, Owen, from the Royal Gazette. Minister, anything last want to add to that?
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Bermuda, for tuning in. I want to thank the parents of those 21 schools that have reached the 80%. You heard me stress that while vaccination is the best possible mitigation against this virus, that is a personal choice. I encourage you to talk to your healthcare provider. But if you can, and if you have not signed a consent for the saliva screening, it is recommended that you do so. In order for us to keep our schools safe, we have to be able to screen our school population on a regular basis. What we do not want is a situation where a school has been opened and we have multiple positive cases that are not caught at an early stage that results in a school now being closed again. What I do not want to do is, I believe parents out there that are home doing remote learning do not want and really do want their children to be back in school because that's the best place for them, do not want them to be coming back into an environment where we haven't done everything possible to ensure their safety and their health. And so if you have not signed up, please sign up. For those who have signed up, thank you very much. I'm sure you'll be contacted in the coming weeks as we look forward to getting our schools back into in-person learning. Thank you, Bermuda.
Thank you. And this concludes our press conference for today.